This podcast is intended for mature audiences only and may contain content that could be triggering. Please listen with discretion. Stephanie's life had always been dictated by others, her parents, her church, and her faith. Every choice was already paved. Every decision was measured against expectations that she never set for herself. But breaking free from that kind of control isn't just one moment. It turns out it's a series of them. And survival sometimes means making choices that don't look perfect from the outside. Survival is a type of exhaustion you feel in your bones. It's messy, painful, and full of difficult choices, all while under public scrutiny.
I just kept thinking, what is broken in me? Because all I wanted to do was love. And then I'm living out in, this small town, and I'm their youth pastor. Still never dealt with my own stuff because I don't know how, but I'm trying the best to love these kids and do my best. And I got to the point where it was just hard to keep fighting. We took this big trip to Trinidad, and there was some of the congregation members that volunteered to go. And we were going up in the mountains to do some performances for their youth there in Trinidad. And I came under fire for this one because I was very young still. At this point, I was probably 21, 22. And I needed everybody, I hate to say it, to fall in line because it was like we weren't there for ourselves. And so one girl was supposed to be in one group. Another lady was supposed to be in another group. And they wanted to be together instead. And I said, well, now there's a group of children that do not have, an adult in their group now to help them. And I said, you don't have a choice. This is what you're here for. So I felt like this strong responsibility to do what was right. And so when we came back from that trip, I will say, I think all hell broke loose.
In the church?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was put on the guillotine, basically. But I ended up taking a break and went to the old pastor's church in Mississippi. And they were the pastors that were at the church before my mom and dad took it over. I drove there and stayed for, I think, almost 2 weeks and just reset. They did personality tests on me while I was there.
Why?
Like Myers-Briggs and stuff. I'm sure that they sent me there to, get me help. I thought I was going there to just take a mental break and then talk to them about fundraising because we had done so well with fundraising in our youth group. And in that break, I realized that I needed to resign from my position, that it was just too much. Okay. I was working all the time and I had a baby still.
Wow.
And this baby's just being, she's being tossed around between people and still trying to make my parents proud, do a good job. I was tired.
You come back from Mississippi.
I stepped down from my position shortly after that and then decide that I am moving to Ohio. And going to World Harvest Bible College for mostly their music program.
World Harvest Church, it is a machine, a sprawling megachurch led by televangelist Rodney Lee Parsley, a man who built an empire on fiery sermons, faith healing, and teaching the gospel's promise of prosperity. To those on the outside, he is a charismatic leader. To those inside, he is unquestioned authority. The church is more than just Sunday services. It is a business, a brand. And at the heart of it all is Valor Christian College, which was also founded by Rodney Lee Parsley. It is considered a private Bible college where the motto is the School of Revival. It is a training ground for the next generation of believers. Students aren't just there to learn theology. They are there to be shaped and molded into crusaders for the kingdom.
We watch Rod Parsley on the TV. I mean, if you haven't seen it, it's a lot. It's a gigantic mega church. Those places just draw large crowds and money grab and It's just a bunch of wild emotions. And, you know, those were some of their like pastoral idols. I was sitting in an evangelical class, is what they called it, taking a test on a final exam about every religion and why they were wrong, why they were bad. I got through about 4 questions, and all of a sudden I put my pencil down and I walked out of class. I think for the first time I had this weird epiphany where I was like, this isn't okay. And I walked out and I didn't go back.
Did you remember having the feeling that of not being around your family? Did that feel good? Did you feel any peace?
The first year I became homesick because I ended up with seasonal depression.
Oh, yeah.
I had never been involved in a winter anywhere.
Interesting.
I lived in the South.
Yeah.
And so oh my God, I just remember my first winter because we moved there in the fall of 2000. And my first winter there, I remember seeing snow out the window from where I was working. And I was like, oh my God, it's beautiful. And I was so excited. And a few weeks in with gray skies and cold, I was sitting on the couch eating Sara Lee cheesecake bites and wrapped up in a blanket and thinking like, what have I done? I miss being, home. And then the second semester, I was going part-time and then dropped out. So my husband at the time was working at that fast oil change place. He had a manager, and he would come over for dinner. We all became friends because I didn't have any friends at this point. I remember being like a maid of honor in one girl's wedding at the college. So this was like our first friend. And eventually, because I wasn't in school any longer, we would go out sometimes, but we didn't have a babysitter. So my second husband would go out, and then it was my turn. So one night he stayed with our daughter, and I went out with his manager, and we just went down the street with a few friends of his, one female, one male, and just had some drinks and played pool. I feel like I went from one extreme to the other, where I was this very Christian girl to now I'm going out to have a drink and play pool. It was like, it was my rebellion. One thing about my second husband, he was harmless in so many ways. He just kind of real goofy guy up to that point, had physically hurt me, mentally hurt me. We were we just fought all the time because we didn't like each other.
Sure.
And that's what it boiled down to. But he was jealous, and that is something I knew from the beginning. So when I came home that evening from hanging out with our mutual friend, his manager, I remember we drove up, we were sitting out on the curb for a sec just talking, and I realized all the lights were out in the house, but he was peeking through the blinds, and I was like, that's really strange. And so I asked this friend, I was like, you might as well come up, we can all hang out. He's up, he's peeking out the blinds. It just seemed weird though, because it was dark in the house. And he's standing there in the dark, and he is just enraged. And he got very violent that evening, and he was very hands-on, like aggressive with me. And I'm trying to be sensitive about these subjects moving forward because there are children involved. But I am trying to also tell this story very truthfully. And so I realized how angry he was, and I'm like, hey, are you okay? Like, what's going on? I, brought so-and-so up. We can hang out. And he wasn't having it. He had formed something in his mind already. It got violent. I did have like some bruising on my body. I grabbed a butcher knife and literally ran backwards down the steps. He jumped on my car, and I drove away. I had always said, and he knew this, I told him, I said, if a man ever lays his hands on me again, I will either kill him or leave him. I did not expect it, but to see him like that was shocking.
Yeah.
The friend was still there, and he didn't do anything. And I ended up driving away I mean, in total panic mode. I think I was processing what happened as quickly as possible. Oh, I was working at a salon at this point, but I didn't have any of the numbers of the girls yet because we hadn't become friends because I hadn't been working there long. And I have nobody's phone number. I'm like, I can't call my parents because I went out to drink and play pool. This is going to be my fault. I brought this on. I did something wrong. I followed him home because I did not know where to go. He tried to lose me at every turn. I'm not going to lie. Yes. I had a Camaro at the time. And so I was able to keep up. And I was racing, trying to keep up with this guy because I was scared to death and did not know what to do and had no one to call. I pulled up in his apartment complex parking lot, and I'm just bawling my eyes out at this point. And he's like, "Do you want to come in?" And I was like, "Please." And we didn't talk about anything that night. I just ended up sleeping on his couch. He slept in his room, that kind of thing. And I didn't tell my husband where I was. I was very scared, and I hid for 2 days. I was completely frozen. And then finally this guy was like, you have to tell him where you are because it was uncomfortable for him. And nothing, once again, was happening between us. I was like, I don't know what to do. And because now I'm a bad person again for being alone with a man that's not my husband. And then finally tell my husband at the time I want a separation.
Leaving isn't always clean. It isn't always planned. Sometimes it happens in a rush. A moment of pure instinct. Stephanie's marriage had been unraveling for a long time. The fights, the jealousy, the quiet resentment between two people who were never meant to be together. But on that night, when her husband's anger turned to violence, something in her shifted. She hadn't expected to run, hadn't expected to grab a knife, flee down the stairs and drive off into the night, with no destination, no plan, just the need to be away. She had nowhere to go, no one to call. Every option felt like a dead end. And so she followed the only road that made sense in that moment, the one leading to someone familiar, who's safe, someone who wasn't her husband.
And so he immediately decides to move back to Texas. So I said, okay, you get to take our child for part of the summer, and I need to get my life together here. Come to find out, my parents intervened, and he ended up moving in with them and with my daughter with him. And so now he is in Louisiana instead. I'm still at this other guy's house. I ended up never leaving. He was like becoming my support system almost at that point, since I did not know anyone. And my parents came up, cornered me in a hotel room, said they were taking me back home, putting me in an unwed mother's home. So I never leave this guy's house. Now, my dad says it was a wrestling match. He never did validate the abuse. I do remember showing people at work the bruises and stuff on my body because I wanted to have evidence in case. And I didn't know to file reports. I didn't know I should take pictures, nothing like that. But I at least had a few witnesses. He ends up becoming my support system very quickly in this trauma situation again. I can't talk to my parents because now my soon-to-be ex is actually living with them. I tried to get emergency custody once I realized that in Ohio. They are not as easy to do that with.
An unwed mother's home is a facility historically designed to house unmarried pregnant women, often run by religious organizations, charities, or social service agencies. These homes were especially common in the mid to late 20th century and were intended to provide shelter, medical care, and in many cases, guidance or counseling for young women who became pregnant outside of marriage. However, the experiences within these homes varied widely. Some offered genuine support and resources to help women care for their children or arrange adoptions. Others operated under strict moral or religious doctrines, often pressuring women into adoption, isolating them from their families, or treating them with shame and stigma.
Later on, my parents ended up, through my ex-husband, gaining emergency custody of my child. So I could not actually have her returned without, kidnapping charges. Right before that, because I was still living with this guy, we did end up becoming intimate. And I did end up getting pregnant, literally the first time.
Okay.
And that's when they came to the hotel in Ohio, met me, threatened to take me to the unwed mother's home in Louisiana. And that's the first time that I really stood up and I said no. And
thank God.
It's also like one of those situations in life. Was all of this right? Absolutely not. I was making bad decisions. My ex was making bad decisions. And
your parents were making bad decisions.
Yes. But I, all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, had felt this need to stand up for what I needed and wanted. I shouldn't have been living with this man. I shouldn't have gotten pregnant. But I needed, for the first time, to feel like an adult. I needed to feel like I could think for myself. I could make a decision for myself. They're the ones that told me the last time, well, you're pregnant, get married. And I was just like, I don't want to take their advice any longer. And let me tell you, it really got rough. Mm-hmm. They did not like that. I'm pretty sure my mom and dad are yes people only. And that's how they were in the church. And that's how they were with their kids. And so we did not speak to each other after that, except for one time my dad had called me and told me all these bad things were happening to me because God's trying to teach me a lesson. And I was starting to get cocky at this point and try to really embrace being, myself. And I was like, stop blaming God for the things that you were putting me through because you're the one doing this, not God. And he hung up on me and we didn't speak for a very long time. The next time I saw them after that was in court when they were trying to take custody away from me, and walking into that courtroom and sitting down on the left side of the room. And then 3 rows of my dad's congregation members filed in, like a small little army. I don't even know why they had to be there except for intimidation factors. I don't even know what they had been told at that point. When I saw the judge, I knew that I was screwed in this custody case. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure things were already decided before I had walked in that courtroom. My dad at one point was like president of the Rotary Club in that small town. They were in Rotary Club together. And then the judge pops up on the stand. And before we even got started, I knew I had lost. There was no way in Louisiana in that courtroom that I was getting custody that day, no matter what I had done. He got emergency custody. I had to fly back to Ohio because I was emotionally a mess. I did not have my kid. I kept a bedroom ready for her. Mm-hmm. It was tough because I also didn't have the money to keep fighting for her. Mm-hmm. And I was also pregnant enough at that point I couldn't keep flying. And so I had to stop and I had to wait until I had my baby. It was beyond hard. I can't tap into what that feels like right now because I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to get through the rest of this story. But it was a devastating part of my life. And I think it took a lot away from my oldest child and I and any bonding efforts. But it was, I think, a little less than a year. I get this phone call from my mom saying, he's everything you said he was. We packed his stuff up and put it on the front porch. He's not even allowed in the house anymore. And I just remember like, okay, I hadn't been speaking to them. They had no grandparents' rights. They were using him. My parents were the one pulling all the strings in this situation, but he was the actual parent. They were just literally with him and guiding and making backdoor deals, that whole time.
Yeah.
So him living with them was a control move from the beginning. That's why my ex's mom didn't even understand it. And she even told me one time, she's like, a child needs to be with their mother. I did not deserve to have my child taken away. My parents are really good at manipulating. Yes. They're very good at brainwashing, and they're very good at control. And he was an easy target for that. And at this point, they can't do anything, and they don't want him to have her. And so I get down there, I get a really good lawyer, and I go fight for full custody. And my mom and dad, I was talking to them because I needed to play it cool because we were still in Louisiana court. My dad's like, I'll go with you to court. I was like, thank you so much. And I walk into that courtroom. My ex is unrepresented, hands over full custody.
What?
The only thing he wanted was that we did taxes, every other year to be able to claim her, either, one of us. And, that was it. After all that, he literally hands over full custody.
So how old is the baby now?
Ooh, let's think. I think at this point, she is 5.
Okay, so we're 5 years in on this battle.
Because she was in preschool when my mom had her.
And so your parents are now supporting you and getting her.
I raised her full time from then on. It was bittersweet.
Yeah?
Because I was so incredibly tired. My body was just getting tired from trauma that I'd never dealt with. The games, having to play with my parents, the money I was having to spend for things that should have never happened in the first place to get my child back. And then an ex walking in the courtroom unrepresented and just handing it over. No questions asked, really. And all of a sudden, my mom and dad want to be my friend again.
Yeah, what's that
And
about?
so, although I walked away with custody, I was so incredibly grateful for that, to be able to bring my child home. And then that child has a sister now. And I wanted them so badly to be together and grow up together. And I wanted to be a family. But I was so incredibly hurt and broken at this point. And it never stopped, Okay. And so I take her back, get her settled in, and I know I can't imagine. I can only think of how much of a toll this actually took on her, and how naive I was to not realize that as a young mother still, and as someone else that had no skills in life. And I feel bad for not knowing that this would negatively affect her. I feel bad for not having her in therapy as a young child. I mean, my head was still wrapped around, God does, heal all. Although I was questioning like certain religious beliefs, I still believed firmly in, God. And I put her in private Christian school. I started taking the same path my parents took with me in a weird way. I was going to do it better than my parents did it somehow, but I was still doing the same things and, in a weird way. And so here we are, this big happy family of 4. And I am not speaking to my parents now.
Are you married?
No, I'm not marrying this guy just because I had a baby. I'm going to wait. And my parents were furious. We were living in sin. I mean, it was bad. Like they did not handle that well. After I had my youngest child, it was just a couple, 2, maybe 3 months later, I ended up in the hospital with blood clots. And from the pregnancy, I was in ICU, I think, for 7 days, and I was sedated, and I don't remember half of it. But literally, it almost killed me. And the person her father I was staying with at the time, called my parents and wanted to tell my mom, although we weren't speaking, that I was in ICU and possibly on my deathbed. And he just thought that she might want to know. And her response to him was, we still don't agree with your living in sin. And they never came. They never even reached out afterward. I'm living my life in Ohio, and I'm doing it by myself on my own terms. And I think I'm a big girl now. Things my parents want me to do, and I'm doing it my way this time, and my way's got to be better, because every time I've done it their way, it's never been good, because how they told me to do it really did not work at all. And then they still don't like me. So, what's it? I guess, why not?
I'm confused as to why your dad did a 180 and went with you, supporting you, when a year ago he brought a congregation in to not support you.
They thought they were being manipulative and really smart, because you got to think, if I wasn't talking to them before this, they hadn't even met their other...
Yeah. So they knew that you were going to get custody.
Yeah.
How did they know?
Because, he was the one at this point. They had just kicked out, and he was the only one that could fight me for custody, because he was the parent. There were no grandparents' rights in Louisiana.
Okay, so your parents knew he was going to lose.
They knew. All of a sudden, they were chummy with me again, because they still wanted to see my child. And I knew that. I wasn't that stupid at that point that I didn't catch on. And so I caught on very quick as to what they were doing with me. And I did play along, and then I did cut them off. And that lasted for just a little while, because then my grandmother dies. And this was my Mimi.
Okay.
And let me tell you, that was my heart and soul. I loved that woman so much. And so she died in October of 2004. And although I hadn't been speaking to my parents, I needed to be there. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be there. She was in the hospital. She was non-responsive. And everybody was there. And I flew in immediately. And she stayed alive. And I got to talk to her, although she couldn't respond. So thankful I got there. Part of me thinks that she stayed alive for me to get there, but and so that was an earth-shattering moment in my life. And here we are, I'm having to talk to my parents. And I remember that weekend, my brother and sister and I were staying in my Mimi's little mobile home that was behind my mom and dad's house. Somebody brought this big coconut cake, and my brother and I were just sitting down with the pan, just eating it straight out of the pan. We were coping.
Yeah, right.
And my dad comes over. I don't know what possessed me at this point to start asking him a few questions about things that I was unhappy about. And I can't even remember what question I asked him, but it had something to do with the past. And I had questions, and he just starts yelling at me. He's running my coconut cake at this point, because I'm just, got an angry dad. Now I can't even eat. And, I don't know which one I was more frustrated about at the time, but he's so upset with me, and he just starts telling me that it's just like I'm, a child, blah, blah, blah. And I tell him, please stop treating me like I'm 13 years old and talk to me, which really escalates the situation. And I realized I really can't talk to my parents. Mm-hmm. Like, I never did want to talk to them because I was afraid. And now that I'm trying to find this newfound big girlness, and be brave and actually ask questions about things I don't understand or don't agree with, It is not a conversation. And so it's really legitimizing the fact that I cannot speak to my parents. While I was there, though, oddly enough, I did find out in that, 2004, when my grandmother died, that my uncle had killed himself that April. And this was the uncle that, wasn't good to me and violated me. And nobody had told me. I know we weren't really speaking at the time, but everybody went to this funeral and stuff. And
wait, the uncle in the pool?
Yes.
He killed himself?
He killed himself. He was 45 years old. And so I also found out that information when I was there for my grandmother's funeral. So I'm back in Ohio and back to my family. And then sometime in this time frame, and I can't remember exactly, we were coming back from one of my oldest daughter's school plays. And so all I see in the back seat is glass all over my children. And it had been raining that night, and we were stopped at a stop sign, and somebody took a corner too fast, and there was a car in front of us and behind us, and they spun out of control and hit us sideways. I didn't even realize at the time that I had a meniscus tear from hitting the dashboard with my knee, but I got out of that car ready to rip that person apart. And my partner at the time, my youngest child's dad, he was injured as well. He had a back and a neck issue from that, but he was trying to grab me before I took after that poor woman that turned the corner too fast.
Oh my gosh.
The kids were fine. There was just glass everywhere. And the reason I'm telling this is because during this time, they're running his driver's license. He was driving. And he all of a sudden has a confession to make because there's something in his life at this point that I do not know. And his license is suspended due to back child support that he owes from having a child that I never knew about. And I consider that my first real big red flag with him that I dismissed.
Stephanie's path was anything but straightforward. And when she finally thought she had control over her own life, her past, her family, her church, the system she thought she had escaped, found new ways to pull her back in. This is what happens when the people who raised you refuse to let go. When faith becomes a weapon, when the fight for freedom is just as painful as the life you left behind. And for Stephanie, the hardest battles were still ahead. Next time on Just One Person.
I thought I'd done a good job. It's like, surely everybody will be happy here. It didn't take very long after that to where, it was like his anger was just off the chain so quickly. My husband and I are constantly fighting. It's just become normal to the point that you don't realize how bad it truly is. And when it came down to it, in 2015, in January, I got a phone call while I was at work one evening, and it dropped me to the ground. I literally, I lost control. It's like my legs went out from underneath me.
Listen to Just One Person on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast. Visit justonepersonpodcast.com for more information. If you enjoy this podcast, please share it with a friend and follow us on Instagram at Just One Person Podcast. If you or someone you know is affected by abuse or is in need of support, resources are available, and we have listed them in the episode notes. Or you can call the Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline. It's 1-800-4A-CHILD, available 24/7. You can also text 4-HOPE to 741-741. Just One Person is produced by J1P Productions, executive produced by me, Lisa Bloom, lead producer and story editor, Carrie Caulfield, Sound design by Alejandro Ramirez. A special thanks to voice actor Scott McKinley portraying Stephanie's dad. Our heartfelt thank you to Stephanie's partner, Melissa Weaver, and my wife, Julie Koleski, for being a part of the podcast team. Also to Stephanie's 3 close friends, Krista, Annalisa, and Bex, for participating in this series. Music for this podcast is from Epidemic Sound and Soundstripe. Original music recorded and performed by our first season's guest, Stephanie Michelle and the Michelle Band.